Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm Mr. East of the Forest. This week, I have a conversation with Patrick McConnell. Patrick is a writer, and I saw some of his writings and musings around the psychedelic space, particularly one he wrote recently about music and psychedelics, microdosing, I believe. And it piqued my interest because not a lot of people are digging into that. But he's got a blog where he writes about this called Adjustable Normal, adjustablenormal.com, and lots of interesting things there. And I reached out, and he's living down in Peru, and he was able to hop on. And so over the magic of this series of tubes known as the internet, we were able to connect, and we have this wonderful conversation for you now. Quick business. Next thing coming up in the live space is going to be at the Love Serve Remember Ram Dass retreat in North Carolina, in the mountains, in the magic of the mountains of North Carolina. I'll be there with my partner, Marissa Rada Wepner. She's going to be leading a lot of the movement and the yoga, and I will be doing a ceremony concert there. And Bob Thurman, who's been on the podcast, will be there. Krishna Das, also been on the podcast. Spring Washam, also been on the podcast. So it's sort of a podcast reunion tour. Lots of amazing things going on there. And I think it's the first time they've done this out in the mountains, so it should be pretty fun to do that. So looking forward to that. That's at the end of August. And you go to eastforest.org/tour and you can see some information about that. And I want to thank some people who signed up on our Patreon, patreon.com/eastforest. It's what I call the council. It's our council on Patreon, Lindsay and Fiad. I hope I'm spelling that right. Thank you for signing up recently, as well as Matt. And of course, thank you to Andrew, who's been one of our supporters since the very beginning. Lots of wonderful people in our council. We even do the monthly Zoom council where we gather in real time and we do a music meditation, and that's one of the tiers. But see if it's right for you. It's a great way to support the East Forest Project and this podcast itself. It's the main mechanisms for supporting the podcast, and I get to share all sorts of fun demos that I find and extra podcast content. See if that's for you. Patreon.com/eastforest. I think that's pretty much it for now. We're hoping to be able to announce some more things coming up. I've got some releases coming up that I'll be able to tell you about soon, and some interesting collaborations. I'm hard at work finishing my new studio record, or I should say next studio record, but it's something I've been working on for a long time. And I'm going to do one more session for some bass and cello with Owen. He's coming into the studio here in a couple days. And maybe I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel on this one. It's always making records is crazy, because sometimes you're feeling really inspired and you're like, oh my God, I can see it. And then there are other moments where you're like, I need to start over. None of this is right. I should. And I have those thoughts. I've been having those thoughts of I can do better. Or it's is this really what I want to put out? But I don't know about you, but sometimes I listen to my release radar on Spotify or something, and it feels less inspiring than it used to be. Almost like people are really pushing to put out so much content that it's more about quantity over quality. Not everybody, of course, but there's always gems in there. But there is such a content machine that we find ourselves in. And at the end of the day, I think we all would prefer quality over quantity, even though we're getting so used to these hits of something new. It's a hamster wheel, but that's the musings in my mind as I am creating. But I did get a chance the last couple days to do some solo backpacking, and that was quite lovely. I was feeling the deep need to do that, and I just feel so grateful that I was able to carve out the time, push some meetings around, and so forth and so on. I went out to Eastern Oregon, So I grew up in Oregon, but I'd never been to this mountain range in Eastern Oregon. It's quite remote, especially if you're coming from the west side of the state. But I was coming from Idaho, and I drove out there and went up, way up this road, way up high, and was this beautiful sort of alpine trail that then dropped into these alpine lakes that was stunning, and hiked up the nearby summit the next day. So it was a couple nights, and it was just me and a bunch of mountain goats, and like a cool thing was a whole lot of butterflies, all different shapes and sizes, monarchs, and I mean it was wild. I got to the top of the mountain, and there were just like thousands of butterflies swimming around me. It was like unreal. But I always feel grateful to be able to have those sorts of experiences, especially when you're solo, because you really can feel ensconced in that natural experience as a reminder of like that's us too. And like all the kind of worldly creations and machinations and structures that we have are just that. They're these sort of structures they're icing on the cake. They're like boats floating around on the surface of the ocean. But the depth of the ocean is who we are too. And that's all of it. That's like this huge, immense, deep, rich experience of spaceship Earth that is alive, the Gaia experience that we are part and parcel and walking around on. So it was great to be able to be up there. And I'm a little beat up, but I'm looking forward to more. All right. Well, thank you again to everyone who reviews the podcast and shares the podcast. You can now review it on Spotify, and you also can review it on Apple Podcasts. That helps a lot for us to get the guests you want to hear and to show support for the show. And, of course, doing that by saying hello anytime you like at info@eastforest.org or on the socials, East Forest on Instagram and East Forest Music on the other platforms. Well, let's dive into this conversation with our new friend, Patrick McConnell. Well, Patrick McConnell, thank you so much for taking the time from far-flung places. You're in Peru, you said?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
It's like roughly similar time zones, right, of where I am?
We're an hour. Yeah, you're mountain time. We're central.
Okay, cool. But a world away at the same time. Welcome. It's nice to meet you. We were just about to talk about how we crossed paths, and I thought that would be better to do that here on the show. So yeah, I was saying that you wrote an article. You are a writer, among other things, and I'd like to ask you more about that. But I saw an article you wrote about intersection of psychedelics and music, and I was about to tell you that there's not a lot of discussion about this out there, and I think one of the reasons is nobody really knows what to say, It's like,
yeah,
and on the other hand, it's not thought about as much. Like it's sort of, everyone knows music is great and can be really transformative in a sense, but it's also at the same time, strangely, an afterthought. So before we get into that, I think it would be good though if you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what some of your passions are. Just bring us up to speed a little bit, and then we'll answer that question.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Patrick. I'm a freelance writer. I do content creation online right now, heavily focused on psychedelics, among other things. I've been just sort of kind of obsessed with altered states and substances and like whatever, like meditation, breath work, all these things for quite a long time. So then a couple of years ago, when all this science and news and everything started coming out, I was going through a life transition and decided to start researching and writing about it. And it's actually turned into a pretty fruitful thing. Yeah.
Where are you from, and how did you end up in Peru?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a Canadian. I'm from the East Coast of Canada. Long, it's a bit of a story, but the short of it is I came here a couple of years ago and drank ayahuasca and went back to Canada. Life didn't make sense. My wife also drank ayahuasca, and we were like, yeah, we're going to leave. And then COVID hit, and we really just got sort of pushed out the doorway quite quickly and went on a bit of an odyssey through Latin America. And now sort of serendipitously, without like a real plan, we've landed in Peru, and we've been here about a year now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where in Peru are you?
Sacred Valley, so just outside of Cusco.
That's. I mean, I haven't been everywhere in Peru, but that was my favorite place when I was in Peru. It was the Sacred Valley. It feels like it says. It's beautiful. It's a good energy there.
It really is. Yeah, there is like a mystical quality to it, especially in the rainy season with the misty mountains and all the Incan ruins. Yeah, it's definitely a special place. Yeah, I figured you'd been here.
Yeah, there was I wish I could remember the name of it. I think it was named. Shit, I can't even. This is bumming me out. I don't remember his name. He did sell it, but he had a little like hotel type place, little place, one of those. And we became friends because we were staying there for like 5 days. And he told us like about a hike. I was saying I really do want to take some hikes that are kind of off the beaten path because I'm a little tired of like seeing all the touristy things. And he's like, if you just go like, down the road and then through blah, 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 and just go up this path behind our place, up the mountain, about 2-3 hours up, eventually you hit this village up there. And he says, it's totally cool. You can go up there. It's a great hike. And I remember we walked up there, my partner and I, Karina, and you get to this spot where it's above the tree line, and there's this community up there, and they're all living in these rock houses that they very basic, just stacked rocks with big holes in the walls, and those are their domiciles. And there was like a waterfall in the back of their little village, and like little goats or sheep. I remember it was very idyllic and very beautiful. But what blew my mind is they would have to hike down the hill quite far just to get firewood and then bring it back up just to have anything to burn, which is their main source of everything, cooking and heating. But that was one of the most magical experiences I had in Peru, was just hiking up to that village.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's like, you don't actually have to go, like, it is quite a touristy here, but you don't have to go so far to find like a really sort of authentic other world, which is sometimes hard to find in like the modern world. It's quite refreshing to see it, even if it's like a little shocking sometimes, actually, like you said, like carrying firewood just to survive up like a mountain.
Hours every day. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so a little more backstory for myself here and for everybody. So, like, what drew you to ayahuasca in the first place? And could you tell us a little bit about, I'm curious about that time you drank for the first time. It seems like it must have been a big deal because here we are talking and like you're still in Peru and now you're writing about psychedelics. It seems like it's a big part of your life and your interest.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, what drew me to it? Like when I was a teenager, I got into psychedelics then, took LSD and had this like kind of like awakening moment, like was like an atheist. And then, yeah, just sort of, like I said, I got obsessed with it. Like I would spend, the site, your Erowid, it's...
Yeah, it's OG. That was like the only site. Yeah.
It was. Yeah. I just spent hours and hours on there. And so back then is when I first heard about ayahuasca. And I was like, oh, yeah. Like
Arrowwood's like the Craigslist of the psychedelic space.
I love it. It's like super.
It never sold out. Yeah.
No, it's still going. Same design, same everything. And I like it. It's kind of raw. Like all the like experience reports are very real life. Not sexy packaging on that. But so I heard about it then. It was on the back burner. And then I guess I was 30, sort of going through a bit of I was just burnt out. I was working in the cannabis industry in Canada. It was like just a very, very intense job. It's very interesting, but it was just too much work. So I took like a vacation to Peru, drank ayahuasca. And so I was just here for 3 weeks and I drank it every couple days. Just going to a local center. It's so hard to sum up that period, but the best thing I could describe it as was it was like a heart-opening experience. Like I'm a very intellectual person. I write and think a lot, and it really brought out this understanding of human connection and like love, just love for my partner and my wife, and realizing how I was sacrificing The like really like meaningful stuff in life to make money and to, I don't know, have prestige or a nice apartment or whatever. So that was kind of the beginning, but it kind of like, like one thing led to another, and it kind of cascaded until there was a lot of factors going on at the time, my relationship and COVID and work. And it just sort of is really interesting going back to Canada, and it just kind of unraveled. Like I didn't fit anymore. I ended up leaving my job quite quickly. COVID hit, and I had this time limit to leave the country before like the world shut down. So it wasn't really like I came here and was like, oh, I'm going to sell everything I own and move to Peru. It's sort of one thing led to another, but it was the heart
as
of
they
it.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
when you take ayahuasca, that's how you sum it up. One thing leads to another,
it's so hard to like pinpoint this moment where ayahuasca is like, you're going to sell everything you own and become a writer. Like it doesn't quite go like that for me anyway.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's dig into things. I just want to I read some of the stuff you were writing, and I just thought it'd be fun to kind of like dig into, riff on some of these ideas and get some different viewpoints on the landscape out there. As we know, psychedelics, there's a lot going on right now, and for better or worse. And so let's talk about some of those things. I'm curious what you think. So going back to music, why is it overlooked? Especially like ayahuasca is a perfect way to segue into this. Like for them, traditionally music is not overlooked. It is the experience. Like it's the vehicle for the spirits to come forth. It's the way to navigate the space. It's everything. Song. And that is sort of what the shaman is really doing, is singing and carrying the songs. And that has not become divorced from that experience. And the ceremonial container with ayahuasca is part and parcel. You don't really see people. Only one time in my life have I seen people passing around ayahuasca socially at a party. And I was like, what is happening? And they were like, you want some of this? And I'm like, are you serious? Like, no. But mushrooms, quite the opposite. We actually, not only has it not stayed attached to that medicine, we actually don't know a whole lot. We know some. We certainly know some, but it's not like these are the songs, this is the experience, this is the container. And we could talk about other medicines, but it's they all have different degrees of that truth in reality in Western culture. Why do you think that is? And what do you think the future holds for the role of music in this space, in this burgeoning landscape that we're in?
Yeah, that's a great question of why. Like, I wish I could think of a specific reason. Like there a few things come to mind. Like, I mean, for one, there's a lot of focus on like sort of patents and marketing things and commercial applications. And I don't think you can patent music. I don't really know how that works. I guess you can. There's IP.
Wait, it's copyrights, man.
Yeah.
You write a song, it's your song.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see that with medicine music. It's interesting that it is a bit of an afterthought because, I completely agree. Like it kind of is the experience, especially with ayahuasca. The shamans, my understanding is that is like a huge amount of their training is to learn how to, it's like kind of like the maps of the ceremony and the space and the different, ways of working with the medicine in people. And it's also, there's so much focus at the moment too about, science and like neurology and pharmacology in particular, like how like a specific compound acts on the body. And I think that that's like kind of where the sort of very narrow view is mostly focused, at least from what I'm seeing with writing about it. I would like to think that the future is going to recognize like the necessity of music to guide a journey. I think it actually does a much better job than words or even other.
Oh, yeah. When I say music too, I could say ceremony. And, one of the biggest things that makes up the quote unquote ceremonial element is the music, traditionally. And so that's something I'd like to see more maybe paid attention to. Because when you talked about the pharmacological, or however you say it, I heard that 80% of the investment dollars right now in this space are all going towards that, like drug development, basically, which is the mindset and the thinking that the West has been in. So of course they're going to go there initially. Like that's where the money will flow. But what about the technology of ceremony, which I'm sure you've witnessed a lot of, the past few years?
The technology of ceremony. Yeah, I love that term. Yeah, I mean, I totally, yeah, that number makes sense. 87% going into actual like novel compounds that people can have rights to and use in their own specific way. We've also, there's also some patents that were going around a while ago regarding like hugging, or no, it wasn't hugging, but it was like specific things to the environment, which is when you say like the technology of ceremony. I think there is actually people trying to get specific practices that they do like be their proprietary thing. So there is like a little bit of interest in that, but it's also like kind of coming from a place that is maybe not necessarily.
How do we own it? Yeah, it's like, I mean, I heard Compass Pathways was trying to like patent things like the couch in the room, and everyone's
That's
like, yeah, it's like, well, lots of people have couches in a room, It's like, it's just absurd to think like that you're trying to own every detail down to those sorts of things.
Yeah, and it's a little, I guess it's a little unfortunate that a lot of the focus on like, oh, like people get a good piece of information, like, oh, people like to be on couches on psilocybin, let's patent it. It's kind of
let's stop other people from using couches.
Let's own it.
That's so mean, like couches are comfortable. It's like we should all be allowed to use them in any way in therapeutic settings, should we desire that.
Definitely. And yeah, I really like the technology of ceremony thing, because I really think that personally, more so than pharmacology, that is where the application and like the most meaningful way of working with these things is going to come from, is sort of the how we do the experience itself, or the integration too, as opposed to like, oh, like this works on this receptor in this way.
Right.
That's super interesting, and I love reading about it. But to actually get I guess the results that people are looking for, my belief is that would come a lot more from ceremony and the experience.
Yeah, it kind of bleeds over into life in general when you think about the how versus how we do things versus the doing itself, like what we do. We think a lot more about what we do, and if you just look at the experience of a psychedelic itself, how you do it is everything. And we've known this. This is not news. I mean, set and setting, one of the initial ideas from Leary and Ram Dass when he was Mr. Alpert, this was it. It's like, hey, the big discovery is like cover these two things, and it will greatly influence the experience itself. And so we know this, but there seems to be sort of a difficulty translating that into recognition of there's an overall how. And like, not just that it influences the experience, but perhaps it's a big part of the experience itself. Analogy could be the brew of ayahuasca and how each shaman might make it a bit differently, and all the other alkaloids and plants that are in there beyond just DMT and so forth. And if you were to just focus on the DMT, it would be a very different experience, most likely. Or the natural compounds that are probably where they are inside a naturally growing mushroom. And we don't fully know how that influences the journey, but it probably does, as opposed to synthesized psilocybin. Not to judge one or the other. I'm just saying there's kind of a hubris to say it's one thing as opposed to this holistic, almost artistic experience.
Yeah, definitely. It's the ayahuasca analogy is great. Everyone, the common thing is like, oh, you take ayahuasca and you drink DMT, maybe talk about the MAOI or whatever, and that's what it is. But it's like when I go to a psychedelic ceremony, it's not just about that I drank a cup of ayahuasca. There's like all of these other, alkaloids or factors in my life, these stories and people and emotions or whatever. It's like this very complex web of interactions to try to make sense of, especially when we're trying to create experiences for people or get certain outcomes from it. So like take all of these things into account it's like almost it's almost an overwhelming pursuit, but I think it needs to be acknowledged as like a larger, holistic type experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's another thing. I mean, there are a lot of analogies with ayahuasca for me because it's such a pure, unique experience, or you still can experience it in that way. Another one's like the sounds, right? So a lot of times when you're down there in Peru, I'm guessing most places you're out and like the sound itself is a very powerful element that influences the journey. Like the sounds of the jungle, or if it's at night, the all those insects and it's loud. Like it's not like a subtle thing in the background. It's like that is this major element of the experience. It's this white noise of aliveness around you that creates a kind of trance state of entrainment too of your brain. Did you experience things like this, like the jungle sounds or the sounds of nature?
So I actually have not done it in the jungle yet. I'm planning a journey there in a couple months, but I've been just in the mountains. So when I go outside, it's just like the Andes, and it's actually
There must
quite
be
quiet.
sounds though. It's quiet because it's high up.
Yeah. So here at night, it's actually quite quiet. Like we can, at the center I go to, I can hear the road a little bit and some dogs, and some, just some sounds of like life. But I have not got to be immersed in like the deep nature with ayahuasca in particular.
It is deep. Yeah. Oh
I'm
my
excited.
God, the jungle. Well, tell me some of the things that you've been writing about. I mean, I pulled it up. I've been looking at some of it, but what's kind of been exciting you? Some of these ideas you've been getting into. Some of the subjects of these writings.
I mean, music is actually a pretty big one for me at the moment because I've just been quite interested in also like sort of emotional content of these experiences. I feel like there's a lot of like kind of intellectual type conversation or ideas about like, oh, like DMT and aliens and other dimensions. And it's almost a bit of like an intellectual game, which is super fun. But it's become really evident to me through sitting in ceremony of just how like a certain frequency or a certain song at a certain moment can just evoke like such strong emotion, like so strong, that it's almost like impossible to ignore that as a meaningful experience because it's so potent. And also, I mean, even to riff on that deeper too, like how that can even be connected to a somatic experience too. How suddenly like you'll hear the music, you'll feel something super strongly, you'll start to feel it in your body. You might even purge if you're doing something like
I was going to say, and then you purge it,
which is like amazing to me, like super, like someone like the last ceremony, I was like feeling sick and just like couldn't purge, and then someone hits the flute and they play it for like a minute or something, and I'm just done. Like it's all just blah coming out, but it was just that frequency for some reason had what I needed to like purge this like emotion in that moment.
Yeah. People often ask me things like, you know, what frequencies should you play at what time, or frequencies in the body and these sorts of things. And I often think like that is a very narrow way of looking at it. It's not just like play this frequency out of a tone generator. It's like what melody or what emotional characteristic, you know, because music, the constituent parts of time, essentially rhythm, and we'll just call it like relationships, ratios, math, that harmony, the other part of it. And this infinite landscape of how you combine those two to create emotional responses, energetic responses, like you're speaking to with the flute. And so it's not as simple as like it's a frequency in my mind. It's like it's an art. And that's why it's so ineffable. And that's why it's so beautiful. Is because you can't put your finger on it. You can't just say, oh, you tuned to 432 or this or that. It's like, that's ridiculous. It's like, it's infinite. That's what's just so beautiful about music. It's like, there's never a limit to the songs we can write. There's never, every human voice is like a snowflake. There's no limit to like, you could sing the same quote unquote note from all these different people and each have a completely different character of overtones and feeling. And anything from just, you know, gross feelings to like beautiful feelings to ecstatic to like repulsive, you know, it's a tool. It's a tool. And what's so confounding about music these days. It's like we started this by asking, like, why is it overlooked in this as much as it is, I think, in this world, psychedelic therapy? But at the same time, it is such a huge part of our world. I mean, from day-to-day life, engendering our own emotional states, from advertising, it is used as a weapon. It's, I mean,
True, yeah.
it really, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So many people are making songs. It's just like, it's almost too obvious. So at the same time, it's like, it's kind of interesting that something that's so important to humanity isn't at the forefront of the conversation in this space. And I think it's because it's artistic and creative and you can't put your hands on it. You can't, and just like the psychedelic experience itself, you can never really grab it. And maybe that has something to do with, it's almost avoided because you can't talk about it. Like, how do we talk about the psychedelic experience? So what comes up for you when I say that?
Yeah, a few things. Not being able to put your hands on it. That's like that's something I grapple with a lot, like trying to write about psychedelics is like, like this Terrence McKenna always says, like, you can't English it. And like with music, like I gravitated to the word frequency because that's just, I don't know. It's just what I've got,
Yeah. Yeah.
It is hard to pin it down into kind of what you said. People ask you, like, say if I was creating like a ketamine clinic or something and I wanted my like sort of like musical routine, like I would want like, oh, I'm going to play like this chord progression with this timing and it's going to do this thing for this person. But like everyone's so individual. And like you said, there's like an infinite way we can play music and sort of an infinite amount of individuals. That relationship is like kind of impossible to quantify. So learning how to work with it seems a little daunting. And then I was also thinking about how you were saying like this is like just a huge part of humanity and like just what we are and what we do, and maybe we're also taking it a little for granted. Like it's so obvious, but sometimes we miss really obvious stuff too.
The obvious is the most devious, as my father would say. Yeah, but it's almost more of a Western. It's kind of ironic. It's a Western blind spot. Where in the West, we're the ones who've cranked music up to 11. We're just like, we invented Spotify and, the iPod and, Macs to mix music on your laptop. And we've really killed it on making more. But it's the older cultures that are like, music is a powerful tool, not just for psychedelics, but I mean, for community building, for celebration, for prayer, for connection, for entertainment. It was kind of like the only thing, probably forever. Mm-hmm. Like there was no other way. You just got together and sang songs or did dances and sang. To like, I don't know, a little over 100 years ago. It wasn't that long ago that we started paying other people to sing for us. And, so it's a lost art in a sense, but it's right in front of our face. Yeah.
I mean, I do think though, like, I mean, just from that recent article, like I do think there's an appreciation building again for something like some sound healing for like I'm seeing all these like apps and things come out where it's like, oh, you can listen to these sounds and it calms you down. And people are like, I mean, it's kind of a Western thing. We're like, oh, we got to like find some utility in this beyond right. entertainment and things. But I do think that there is a bit of a different appreciation creeping in around music.
I know. I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate for the conversation. It is building. I mean, actually, you just wrote about it. So, I mean, it's building. But it is true that there's also not a lot of options out there from a modern perspective for guiding journeys that I personally find are very effective. I have a very high bar, I guess, about what I think could be, as how beautiful I think it could be or should be, as opposed to like just some bowl being drummed for like an hour and I'm like, shoot me in the head. Like it's like, sounds like torture. But a lot of people, that's their go-to, sound healing doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be monotony. Uh,
Yeah, no, and I think that like dynamic aspect, especially in like a journey space of like highs and lows and different,
yes.
It just stirs up different stuff at different times. It's really important for it not to just be like, yeah, like ambient noises and the same droning tones.
That's right. That's right, Patrick. Like the narrative, like that's baked into us too. Is like the hero's journey. It's like the music. It's for a journey. Like it should have its own arc to help you navigate the journey itself. Like musically, it has to tell a story with its highs and its lows and its tension and its release, and hopefully do that in a way that's still good music and good taste. Not just like Disney music or
Yeah.
something like that. You're totally right, and I think that's part of the human condition, is that we want it to have an arc. We want it to come to us and go away, in a sense, just like the journey itself, just like life. It's here and it's not here. It's like tension and release, waves.
Yeah, tension and release is something I think about quite a bit with it. Actually, actually quite a bit in ceremony too. With some of the, I like say the Icaros from the jungle. Some of it is like quite uncomfortable, like unpleasant, like pretty dissonant sounds. And that actually, some of those ones that when you hear like the whole room, everybody starts purging. And I kind of wanted to ask you about that, like the dissonant, like uncomfortableness sounds, like playing with those in like a journey space. Like, is that something like you try to do to like sort of like stir up the goop and then like release it?
Yes. Yeah. And it's more like it. So, I mean, just a backstory that when I play ceremonies and record those albums, they're improvised and they're live. So on one level, it's a little less intellectualized, like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. It's like I'm sitting in a studio. It's more like it's happening. And I want to just allow it to happen. But I allow it to happen. So it's like you can feel in the music, it's like, you feel the excitement of like, it needs to have this and then this. And you're like, this is getting thick. This is getting gooey. And like, there's a tension and there's maybe musical elements crossing that. There's a dissonance to it, which you can lean into that and sense what's happening in the room. Like, no, this wants to happen, as opposed to the opposite. It's like, oh, we got to steer a little this way. But it is all about that tension and release, because that's the narrative of our life, the narrative of journey, of leaning into something to give us the space to explore spirit, and then to have some kind of breakthrough or work through it and have enough time to do that. Just a couple days ago, sometimes I get a message or an email that's forwarded my way from someone who's like, I had this journey, and this woman wrote me, and she's like, it was kind of interesting because it relates to what you're saying, but she's like, I had this big journey and I put on your music and it was really guiding me and it was amazing. And it got towards the end, and then this such and such song came on of yours in the album. And it was really dissonant and getting dark. And I tried to turn it off and she couldn't figure out how to turn it off. So she had to listen to it. But her initial inclination was like, just hit go, skip to the next song. Yeah. But she couldn't, so she had to journey with it, and it turned into this like, oh my God, this great lesson into like being with the uncomfortable and then working through it to the other side, and the sort of feelings and whatever happened through that. And we do live in a culture that wants to just skip the uncomfortable, whether it's take a pill or whatever it is. And that's not really why we're here. Right, we're here to we're here to feel. Feeling is the point, and the jewel is in the feeling. And so, to answer your question, yes, I think it's very important that it's not just like, let's say, angelic sounds for the whole time or something, because there's nowhere to go. There's no friction to rub against to know where you are. There's no map, in a sense.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about the woman who wanted to press skip, because we can do that and we're used to that.
She couldn't, but
she wanted it out. Yeah, which is awesome. I love it.
Which button?
It's destiny. the good thing I think about like having a facilitator, like a shaman or whatever you want to call it, is if say you feel that energy in the room going there and you decide to go there, everyone can't just skip. Like they've committed to this ceremony, to this space. They're not just going to leave. Whereas it's a little bit harder to do that on our own. Like it's
That's
possible,
right.
but
That's right. You have a captain with you guys. Well, somebody's got their hand on the wheel. I'm just going to trust. I can, it gives you a little more safety to be like, all right, I'll lean into this because I'm not just here alone. Like, I don't need to make decisions about like, whoa, did we go way off the rails? Look, I'll admit it takes a lot of people to trust the music that's guiding them. It does, because I don't know how you feel, but it can be very, very powerful and influential to the journey itself. And that's why, ultimately that's why I'm talking about it, because I'm like, it's a big deal to what you listen to in my mind. And that's why the people who haven't experienced like maybe high quality or intentional music in this space, they don't even know where it can go.
yeah, that's fair. And until it's been experienced, it's hard to know what's possible. Like I'm quite blessed to sit at a center where there's many talented musicians that play like this huge variety of instruments, and it's a really rich experience. And yeah, I don't know if I could go back to other ways of drinking ayahuasca in particular. But yeah, without that kind of skilled facilitation and those kind of that level of experience of how to actually kind of get people to trust you. Like if I'm alone in my room and I'm just like journeying with my Spotify playlist and it starts getting like super dark, like I'm probably going to have like doubts of like, oh, like, is this going to like make me feel awful afterwards? Like, can I handle this on my own? And, I can have to make that decision myself. But if I have a really skilled facilitator that I really trust, who starts playing something that just feels awful to me, but if I trust them, I'm going to do it, like I'm going to go there. But it's
yeah, I'm not much of a fan of these playlists, but that's why we started the whole Journey Space thing, or these albums. But honestly, most people don't know the difference. It's like if I play live, they'll still think I'm DJing up there or something, and they'll say, not trying to disrespect DJs, but they'll just be like, I'm like, I was playing live, and they're like, sweet DJ set. Where can I download it?
Right.
Let me ask you this. What are you feeling kind of hopeful for, and also what are you feeling a bit concerned about in this current moment, in this landscape?
In the psychedelic landscape, like broadly?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just feel hopeful that it's like, I don't know, going mainstream or just getting public like greater acceptance. Like the stigma is lifting quite a bit. Like I grew up being told I was like dirty because I did drugs, and I was like having these spiritual experiences, and it's like super confusing, So I'm really optimistic just about that larger acceptance, that it's like it's okay to like experiment with your consciousness and have these experiences, and it even be mysterious and strange and confusing, and like it's probably good to explore those things. So that makes me feel quite good, actually, quite good.
Any concerns? As you're writing about this and digging into what's going on.
Yeah. So concerns would be, I actually have a bit of opposition to things being like a purely sort of medical framework. I think there's a pretty obvious application that psychedelics can do some pretty profound stuff for people with, like really intense mental health issues they're dealing with. And like, I think having controlled environments and like in sort of a medical framework is good. However, I also, a big part of psychedelics for me is like creativity, exploration, these things that don't happen in like a small room in a clinic with a Spotify playlist and eye shades, like, and a therapist like hovering over you. Like, I don't actually think I would like that, to be honest. I want to like do it in a ceremony and be meaningful in that way, or like do it alone in my room and like draw crazy pictures and like just mess around and being creative and play, or like connect with like my partner. And I think that stuff is completely healthy and awesome. And I just don't want that to get lost in this, like, oh my God, like we can cure OCD. Like that's awesome. However, we can probably do a whole bunch of other stuff with this as well. Because I think like play, creativity, those are legitimate forms of therapy. Those do amazing things for people, and like creative new ideas, like the world needs that stuff in a big way. So being open to those, I think, is maybe not as much a part of the conversation as I'd like to see at the moment.
Well, in some ways, you'll see articles like there was one on the Drudge Report recently about how, so many people, it's commonplace to be taking mushrooms for like performance enhancement,
Right.
basically. And it's like, okay, of course, that's where the mind goes. It's just like, how can I essentially be a better hunter? But this is just being a better like tech tycoon or coder or whatever. So I know there's like a connection there to like just being better humans on the ground, but it's like the stoned ape theory meets Silicon Valley,
Yeah. I mean, I actually, I've seen a lot of articles about the like, oh, like you're just using microdosing to be productive. And it's like, yeah, like, sure, like you can get into this like, oh, we're just like fueling this capitalistic system with these microdoses of the sacred substance. And it's like, it's definitely like a conversation to be aware of. But I'm also like, I don't know, I love my work. I get to be creative for work. Like maybe I want to like microdose or take a whatever small dose to get those juices flowing and to like be in my flow for like many, many hours. Like if people want to do that, like I'm totally happy for them to do it. I don't want to scorn people trying to be productive at something that's like really awesome and meaningful. And
do you think that you can buy like a Coca-Cola in the future and it'll be like, with magic mushrooms for like sport boost,
a Coca-Cola, it's maybe not Coke, but I could see it being like this wellnessy type product, like you
Mr.
go to a health
Pibb.
food.
Oh, Mountain Dew with LSD.
Yeah,
it's
Mountain
like
Dew
10
acid.
mics of extra caffeine and LSD micro hit. Yeah,
it's possible. It's completely possible. Like I'm
sadly
sure,
plausible. Yeah,
it is. Like I'm sure if the regulations allowed, that marketers would have like a field day with creative like substance combinations in like energy drinks. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't know if it's what I want, but it could.
Going back to that party where someone was passing around that bottle of ayahuasca, and I was just like, I feel like they were just taking these sips. I don't know if it was something like, I don't know, derivative of ayahuasca or something of this nature, but from the jungle. And I'm like, I feel like all that would do is make me ill. Like I would just feel kind of queasy and guilty, and I'd be walking around, trying to have a conversation with someone, being like, I feel like I could purge if I had more of this, and I'm listless. Well, there's also, of course, mushrooms are a little different because they grow all over the world, and they have this very diffuse history, but nonetheless, sort of the extractive nature, our colonial nature, where, with ayahuasca in particular, I mean, there you are, a white guy from Canada down in Peru, like, extracting the sacred knowledge,
harvesting, appropriating the indigenous knowledge. Yeah, no, it's real.
This is part of it. I mean, you seem like a good guy, but I'm more talking about sort of the corporate where they turn it into commodities, of course. And I know the whole ayahuasca tourism over the last 10, 15 years is a big deal. It's really changed things down there. Brought a lot of money in, but it's also brought forth, anytime you bring money in, it can turn something sideways, Have you seen a lot of that firsthand?
I mean, here in the Valley, I think it's probably a bit different in the jungle, is my feeling. But you definitely see it here. I mean, there's a ton, like this is like, people come here to do medicine. That's like why people come to PSAC where I am. Not everybody. There's like nice hikes and stuff, but there's a huge culture of, people coming and just wanting to try everything in the book. there's definitely, it is rife with charlatans. Like there's a lot of people trying to make money off this, that probably didn't like study in the jungle for 10 years to become like a real ayahuasca, like curandero, ayahuasquero. It's there's definitely a ton of opportunists. In terms of the money, that's pretty complicated. Like this is like there's like some super extreme poverty here.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to say the money coming in is bad. I mean, it definitely goes to very few people. It definitely goes to a lot of the people who can afford to like own property and retreats and things like that. And then you kind of get all the charlatans like trying to make money off of these experiences, because you can grow San Pedro or something and just give it to people. Man, that's a big complicated thing. I have mixed feelings about it. Like, I think it's really amazing. It has brought like a significant amount of respect and curiosity about culture in this part of the world. I think it's really easy to come here and just like get blasted on ayahuasca for a week and then go back home and like not have to deal with any of the other sort of issues and consequences of the tourism of just like the poverty and the extreme situations that people live in. Like the tourism, like the money is not going to solve those problems. Obviously there's a bunch of really conscious centers that give back, but it's like the money's good, but it's not really fixing everything at all. The interest and the curiosity about like ancient cultures in different parts of the world and how other people are and have been, working with medicine or healing is great. I guess what I'd say at the end of the day is I'm not really seeing a ton of like widespread solutions, really great stuff coming out of it. Again, I think it's really difficult. I think it's really difficult to find a way to translate this like one thing that people are really interested in that they can come and do in Peru into sort of something that can actually help like Peruvians or people in South Central America as a whole.
Yeah, it is complicated, and transformation in general is usually messy. For people, individuals, and how that translates out into the world. I mean, quite a mess we're in as a world right now. But on one level, it's a kind of composting, a transformational process that is. Some things fall apart, some things break down, some things explode, some things are born, some things are germinating, but it's usually not a straight line. So it's good to be as conscious as we can of this stuff, but it is a mixed bag. That it's nice that some of these wisdoms and traditions are being shared with people who need them, and also terrible that it can be done in an imbalanced way, or just what it brings out on some levels of humanity on both sides, where we try to take advantage. We have short-sighted thinking. I suppose that's inevitable, but good to keep our eyes on, to be sure. Well, as we round the corner here, Patrick, I mean, is there anything else that you're feeling kind of alive about, or that's sort of on the precipice of your mind or your heart personally, or in your professional landscape?
I was actually just gonna comment on so people come here seeking kind of a really traditional experience. I think we have a slightly really common
jagged internet connection because you are very, very far away.
Can you hear me now?
You are back. Yes. You're back.
Okay, sweet. Awesome. The Peruvian internet comes and goes. What I was going to say in regards to the like is that people come here wanting like these very traditional experiences, and you want to like do your plant dieta with a shaman who's studied in the traditional way in the jungle and done all the things. But it's also, I have this strong impression that like the rituals and the ceremonies and just the way that something like ayahuasca is being served to people is like changing like quite a lot, quite rapidly.
Wow.
Just the way a ceremony is held, the way a training is done, the language people are using, like this, like the the worldview from someone who's from the Amazon, who's from one of the tribes that have been carrying ayahuasca for so long, is like so different from ours. Like the cosmology that a shaman might be working with in a ceremony, like to me personally, like I find it fascinating, but it's so foreign. Like it's so hard for me to relate to, like multiple layers of reality and entities and all of these things that are like quite real for a lot of people actually. So I guess I was just saying that because you're asking, like, if what I'm seeing, like people coming here and the tourism and stuff, is that these are changing. And I often get curious about how those things are ever going to really meet. Because like ayahuasca is really strange, like especially with this, like that sort of cosmic worldview with all these symbols and things. It doesn't, like I drink ayahuasca and I might see all these visions, but to me, I'm coming away with some kind of like emotional awareness of like, oh, I need to like love my wife more or something. Whereas it can also be interpreted with like, oh, like the jaguar means this because you went here onto this plane of reality. And I don't know how all that's going to fit together. Does that make sense?
Well, what comes up for me when you say that, Patrick, is like maybe we don't need to know how that all comes together, or it's like beyond our minds. Our minds want to like put those puzzle pieces together, but this is a space that is far beyond just mind. And I certainly wouldn't say I know how that all fits together. I'm humbled by it, but it is a process. It's a process of becoming that we are a part of, and each purge, each decision you make to love, is part of that process. And even the people who aren't in ceremony, it's all part of it. It's not, one's better or worse, but these are very powerful experiences that are out there right now, that have been out there, but they're burgeoning right now in a way that is exciting, but also it's a kind of wildfire that you're like, where's this going to burn? It's fertilizing those fields as it burns, is one way to look at it. But it's like, I don't know where this goes. Is anyone in control of it? Hopefully not.
I highly doubt anyone is actually in control of how this is all evolving. Yeah. And I do like that you call it the compost heap and that things are burning and changing. And that is just the way of it. And I also really like that you said there is no one way that's better than the other. I think, I would like to see some sort of merging of the different ways. However, they're so different. They're so different. Like my imagination cannot quite handle like what the heck that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good to have that cultural or just differentiation of opportunities. That's healthy. That sort of diversity is good. And in some ways, more diversity would be great because it's a sign of health, I think.
Yeah, I think it's awesome actually that something like the more I read or learn or experience, the wild strangeness of ayahuasca versus like my like very like logical, rational Western worldview, like it inevitably challenges things. Like I could sit here and hypothesize all day about how I think psychedelics work, but like I have no real clue how something like ayahuasca works. And it would seem that the shamans do have a bit of an idea how it works. However, it like almost like makes no sense to me, except I can experience it and it works. But it's very hard to, you said it earlier about music, to just like to hold on to grasp, to make some sort of satisfying.
I want to own it. I must put it in my Fabergé egg and on the shelf. Yeah. It's a very Western natural idea to like, we've just encoded in us to capture things and put it in a cage.
Totally. We're going to like rationalize it, make a tidy explanation to put it in an encyclopedia, and then
good luck with that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not doable.
Yeah, I would say if you go into an ayahuasca journey or any of these journeys with that's your intention. Like, I'm going to understand it and put it in a book. It's like let's the cosmic slapdown's about to happen. Yeah.
I mean, lots of people try to do it. And it's a worthy pursuit. Oh man, it's good fun to go in there and try to understand something. But yeah, I agree. The slapdown is probably more likely than some sort of concrete like theory of the universe or something.
Well, you nailed it on the head. You got to keep it fun. You got to keep it playful in this cosmic play. But I'm excited for you that you can still be down there and continue these explorations in your writings. It's nice to meet you, and we look forward to seeing what's next. What is next for you, and how can people interface with your work?
Oh, sure. I mean, I continue writing. I'm basically right now I'm studying circling as an integration technique. So like authentic relating and group work. So I'm hoping to have an offering for that in the future. People can find me at adjustablenormal.com. That's my blog. You can sign up for the newsletter there. That's where I put all my musings and ideas. And
do you have are you doing the Substack thing? Is that part of Adjustable Normal?
No, it's just a thing on that website. So
okay.
Yeah, if you go there, you can find that newsletter there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I will put that in the show notes too. And Patrick McConnell, thank you so much for sharing some time with us today.
Wow, yeah, thanks so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it. And thank you for leading the way with what you're doing. It's amazing stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick, for taking the time, and very cool to be able to chat from Peru, and always great to meet a new friend in the community. This song that you're listening to is called Undying, and it is off the Possible album. There's a playlist actually on Spotify that we call it Possible Everything. And it's got the Possible album, the Still Possible B-Sides album, the Live in the Studio 4 songs. So check it out, and you can hear everything from these sessions. The Still Possible album is the most recent, and that's just like I said, some of the outtakes and B-sides from that recording session. And be sure to check out Patrick's adjustablenormal.com in the show notes. He's got some great writings, and I think you will enjoy them. I look forward to seeing you on the road. Dates are coming soon, and there's some up there now. Go to eastforest.org for all things tickets and things like that, especially our friends in Europe, because those dates are ticketed and are selling now. I got to get my plane ticket, but I'm looking forward to seeing you in November. Okay, y'all keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do, you know what to do. Do it with grace.